Hi there, and welcome back. My name is Barrett from C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College, and in this video today, I will be covering the Security Plus Lab series, Lab 22, Linux Account Management. Um, it's a really great lab to get to know Linux a little bit better. So if you're a beginner, I'll do my best to add some context and maybe a little bit bonus commands along the way to get you comfortable and familiar. But what we'll essentially be doing is looking at adding users, adding groups, looking at the Etsy password and Etsy shadow files where passwords are stored, and essentially going over the identity and access management side of administering uh, on Linux. Great, so we will be working with the Ubuntu machine in this lab. Let's get to the page that starts the lab. The password here is secure password. Log in. Okay, great. So we'll launch the terminal from the menu bar on the left. Now, the very first command, very important command for you to learn and understand how it works in Linux. So the sudo command allows you to, in this case, what we're doing is we're actually changing to the root user account. So what will happen, it will ask us for the password for our current student account, which is secure password. And now you'll notice that we are no longer at the student at Ubuntu command prompt, but we are at root at Ubuntu. Now, for anyone new to Linux, root is basically another word for admin or administrator. So you could think of this in terms of Windows running commands as the administrator. So it's wise security practices to always be logged in as a standard user account, but there are ways to access administrator level or run things as the administrator. So oftentimes you can even use this sudo command in front of another command that requires root level access, and you don't necessarily have to switch to the root account, but you just add sudo to run just that one command, and then it asks for your password. And the reason why it allows the student to access root privileges is because the student username is added into what's called a sudoers file. So it's given permission to run this root level, to gain root level access. So a little bit more details than the lab was going over, but it's a very important command to understand, and it's something you'll come across in future labs and just in general working with Linux. Great. So now that we are running as root and we have that administrator level access, let's add a group, and we will call it HR. So group add HR. And pretty much whenever you don't see an error come back, that means that it was a successful command. And of course, we can verify. We'll use the cat command. It's short for concatenate, and it's basically a way to print out either a file. In this case, we're printing out a file that's located in the Etsy folder, and the file is called group. So you'll see it just prints that file out onto the screen. And what this is, it's a big list of all of the different groups that have been created on this system. And you'll notice HR down here at the bottom, it has a group ID of 1002. Generally, whenever you add groups, I'll just go ahead and add another group here just so you can see group add HR2. And I'll show you another quick Linux tip. If you press the up arrow on your keyboard, you could scroll through previous commands or a command history. So let's say if I wanted to run cat Etsy group again to list that, I'm going to just pressing the up arrow. So that's a little tip. So I ran that again, and now you see it added HR2, and the group IDs are incremental. So that's something good to know, how Linux handles addition of both groups, and it's also the same with users as well. So let's go ahead and add a user, and we'll name her Jenny. Whoops, I'm misspelling that there. Okay, so it's going to prompt us to enter in a password. So in this lab example, we're just going to use the password secure, which is obviously not a secure password, but we'll just make it easy to remember for now. It will ask for the full name. We'll enter in Jenny. And then for everything else, we'll just skip that and hit enter. Is this information correct? Yes. Okay, great. And now, so remember we had created that group called HR. Well, we could run user mod and add an option of capital G, and we could add this new user to the group HR. Okay. We could even, actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's go ahead and add a second user, Joe. We'll give him a password of secret. Give him full name Joe. We'll go ahead and skip these parts. Information is correct. And let's go ahead and add him to the HR group as well. So user mod, capital G option, HR Joe. And very important when you're doing commands like this, the syntax is important. You want to make sure you don't forget that dash, the dash in front of the G. The capital G is very important. So those are case sensitive commands. Okay, so now we've created a group. We added 2 new users, and we added both of those users to that group. So let's cat out the password file that's also located in the Etsy folder. Now this file, it's oddly titled. It technically doesn't hold passwords. Once upon a time it did, but now you notice besides the username, it has this little X here. And what that's saying is there is a password created for this, but it is encrypted in a hash format. And we'll come to that in just a little bit and where that's located. But you'll see here, you have the user ID number as well. It lets you know the home folder for these users as well. But essentially, this is confirming that these users have been created. Now, going back to their passwords. Passwords are located in the Etsy shadow file, but it's not the way you think. You don't actually see their password because they are hashed. It's a pretty much a one-way encryption. This cannot be decrypted. Although there are password cracking tools like John the Ripper, for example, that the way that it essentially cracks it is it will run a brute force attack and compare hashes to attempt to match it. So there are ways to get around it, but for the most part, this is a pretty strong encryption method. So this is, once again, the Etsy shadow file is where the password hashes are located, and the Etsy password file is where essentially usernames are listed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clear screen. Nice keyboard shortcut for that is Control L. Nice little Linux tip. And we will move on to the second part of the lab. Now, since we have these 2 different user accounts, you are able to, and remember we're in the root account still here right now, but we could essentially access a separate shell for a specific user. So we'll do Control Alt F1, and this is going to bring up a separate terminal window, and we will log in with Jenny, and her password was secure. And now you see that we are at the Jenny at Ubuntu prompt. And important to note, whenever you see the $sign at the end of the prompt, this means that you are logged in as a standard user. If you see the hashtag, this means that you are logged in as root. Very nice command, a handy command is pwd, or print working directory. So this, if you ever need to figure out what directory you're located in, this will just print that back to you. We can go back one directory level by doing cd space ... You see that this takes us back to just the home directory, and we are no longer in the home/Jenny directory. We can list the contents of the directory, and by adding a -L option, it's what's called a long listing. So if I did it without that, you see it's not as detailed. And what we could find by doing this long listing is details about the permissions of either folders or files. Now, anytime you see blue, this denotes a folder. Let me do something real quick. I'm going to touch test.txt. So I'm basically creating, oh, never mind. I don't have permission to create. I was basically trying to show how if I had created this test.txt, actually here's a good tip, sudo touch test. Actually, this may not work because another good example, Jenny is not in the sudoers file. This incident will be reported. So we notice that the student username is in the sudoers file, but Jenny's username is not. So she's unable to do administrative tasks like that. But essentially what I was trying to show is if the test.txt was created, it would display it in just regular white text, but all of the folders would remain blue. So let me clean this up since I diverted from the lab a little bit, and we'll come back to this. So we're listing for 4 folders here. And if you reference this, you'll see that the very first field, the D, will tell you if it's a directory, or if it's a file, it would just be a dash. It would be empty. Now the next 3 is the user fields, the user permissions, and then the next 3 in the middle are referred to the group permissions, and then the final 3 fields refer to other, or any other users outside of the user or the group. So in this case, the student folder, we have all users have read write, or the user that owns that folder has read write and execute. The X stands for execute. The group, which the group that owns this folder is also student. They have read and execute, but not write. And then any others, such as Jenny, has read and execute. So we could potentially go to the student folder and execute any files that were in there. Okay, so let's go into the Joe folder, and we'll see that others we have read and execute here. So we can navigate here. We could list the files. So there's an examples.desktop file in there. And we can move back. So we're back from the Joe folder. We're back in the home folder. But this is basically just showing you how you can navigate the file system as well. The more you use Linux, the more you become comfortable. And of course, as you work through these labs, at the end of the semester, you'll become very comfortable with Linux. Okay, and now we could also move to a new terminal. Let's do Control Alt F2. And this time we'll log in as, we're going to log in as root. Yes, we're going to log in as root this time. Secure password for the password. And now remember, like I said, instead of a $sign, we now see a hashtag denoting that we are at root. Okay, now let's move. We're moving to the root home folder. Or I'm sorry, not the root home folder, just the general home folder where all of the other user folders are. Okay, and now what we're going to do, we're going to use a very common command called chmod or chmod. And we are going to change this permission on the Joe folder, and we're going to remove this X. So we're going to remove executable access to this folder. So we'll do chmod, and we'll say O for others, and minus X. So we're removing the X. In the case that maybe we're adding executable permissions, we would do plus X. But in this case, we're going to do minus X. And we're going to give the folder name Joe. If we do LSL to do a long listing again, we now see that that X has been removed. And now let's switch back to the Jenny terminal. So Control Alt F1. You'll see we're back here. And let's do ls-l. Okay, we see the Joe folder, permission denied. Okay, so let's see, moving on. Now that we switched to Jenny's terminal session, yep, so that's what we just did, permission denied. This is another really nice chart that you could reference. It's a good idea as you're learning Linux to kind of come up with some cheat sheets. And these are things you could definitely Google as well. Common commands, it'll just kind of remind you that, okay, if I want to add read permissions for others, O plus R. And the more you use it, the more you become comfortable with that. Okay, so moving on to part 3 of the lab. Let's go ahead and exit from this current login, the Jenny login. And now we could log in as Joe. Joe, his password was secret. Okay, we are logged in as Joe. We could verify our present working directory. We're in the Joe folder. Let's cd space ... We'll move back to the standard home folder and we'll do ls. We'll do a long listing. Okay. So notice that Joe's folder is set that others are not able to access that folder. So that's what we had done previously in the last part. Here's some really good handy permissions charts. And what we're going to be doing is working with numeric values with chmod. So when you see a 3-digit number like this, like 764, the first digit refers to the user. You see it here. The second digit, 6, refers to group. And the third digit refers to others. So that's the 4. And so the 7 is meaning that all users have read, write, and execute access. The 6, part of the group, has read and write access. And 4 means all others just have read access. So that's essentially, when you look at this Joe folder right now, that is what we see here. So read, write, and execute for users, that's 7. Read and read and execute, that's 5. Okay, so actually this is a little bit different. So this is actually 754, if that makes sense. So we have read and execute is 5, and read only right here is 4. So 754. And what we're going to do, we can modify all of this together by using this number. So what we're going to do, we're going to change Joe to be 705. So the users will have read, write, and execute. The group will have none, and all others will have read and execute. So let's go ahead and use that command. And now if we do a long listing again, we see that that's exactly what has changed. So read, write, and execute, that stayed the same. That's a 7. Absolutely no permissions on the group, so that's 0. And read and execute for others, that is 5. Okay, now let's move into the Joe folder, and we will do touch test.txt. So now we can actually create a file, and you see that located right there. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to log back in as Jenny. Let's exit the Joe login. Jenny, password is secure. Okay, we're going to go to the home folder, cd/home, ls-l. Okay, so we have read and execute access to the Joe folder. So let's go there. Take a look at the files. We see that test.txt, but you'll notice that on the file itself, we don't have execute. So we can access the folder, but we don't. So if I did the lab is wanting us to create a file. So touch jenny.txt, we see permission denied because we don't have write access. So we would need a W here enabled to actually write a file into this folder. And yep, the lab is now complete. Hopefully this has given you a nice crash course in a lot of Linux commands, kind of getting more familiar with navigating the file system, and also obviously learning more about the identity and access management side of things, creating users, creating groups, editing permissions and things like that. I know the command line interface is much different for anybody who's used to working with Windows and the GUI or graphical user interface. But you'll come to find that as you become more comfortable with this, very powerful to work with. So this concludes this Security Plus Lab series, Linux Account Management Lab 22. Thanks a lot for watching.